Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis très content d'être ici aujourd'hui avec la vice-première ministre Freeland et les ministres Anand et Joly. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the discovery of possible burial sites at the St. Joseph's Mission Residential School in BC. Today we're thinking of Williams Lake First Nation and everyone affected. As always, we will be there for Indigenous communities as they do the difficult and important work of conducting searches. This is a critical part of confronting the tragic legacy of residential schools. We will be there to support healing and get closure for communities. Cette semaine, on a eu des rencontres très productives avec le Conseil des ministres. On a discuté de nos priorités, la lutte contre la COVID-19 et l'importance de la vaccination et nos actions pour une relance économique forte. We're going to keep doing whatever it takes to support provinces and territories, small businesses, frontline workers, and families through this pandemic. At the same time, we're focused on the big things that Canadians sent us here to do: grow the economy and the middle class, fight climate change, and stand up for global issues important to Canadians and to the world. We also discussed the legislative priorities for when the House of Commons returns next week. Sur l'économie, on a connu une forte relance économique jusqu'à présent, avec 108% des emplois perdus qui ont été récupérés. Il reste des défis à relever: le coût de la vie, les perturbations de la chaîne d'approvisionnement mondiale, les pénuries de main-d'œuvre. So we're focused on delivering results like reducing childcare fees to make life more affordable for families. Whether it's through growing the middle class or supporting small business owners, we'll continue building a strong economy for years and decades to come. We're also continuing our leadership on climate change. To ensure long-term growth, we need to be competitive in the clean global economy of the future. We've been helping industry cut pollution. We're protecting lands and oceans. We're helping Canadians afford electric vehicles. And we introduced a price on pollution right across the country. But now is the time to move Canada forward even further, even faster. We need to seize the opportunities for all workers and businesses, including workers in our resource industries. And we continue to need to take action to keep Canadians safe from wildfires, floods, and heat waves. Que ce soit pour lutter contre les changements climatiques ou en finir avec la COVID-19, le Canada continue de faire sa part chez nous, mais aussi sur la scène internationale. On continue donc de faire notre part aussi quand vient le temps de s'attaquer aux autres enjeux auxquels la communauté mondiale est confrontée. Évidemment, l'Ukraine a été un sujet important durant nos rencontres cette semaine. With rising tensions and unwarranted Russian aggression, Canada will be there to provide ongoing support to Ukraine so that it can defend itself. Let there be no mistake that Canada, alongside all of our democratic allies, stands strong for Ukraine. And everything we do is motivated by our pursuit of de-escalation and a diplomatic solution. Le Canada, avec ses alliés démocratiques, est solidaire de l'Ukraine. Toutes nos actions ont pour but de diminuer la tension et de trouver une solution diplomatique. Aujourd'hui, pour soutenir l'Ukraine, j'ai autorisé le prolongement de l'opération Unifier pour 3 ans, en plus d'élargir cette mission de formation. Today, I've authorized the extension of Operation Unifier for 3 more years and the expansion of this training mission as well as immediate support. This is a $340 million commitment. As part of it, I've authorized the Canadian Armed Forces to deploy 60 personnel within days to join the approximately 200 women and men already on the ground, with further capacity to increase the number of people on the ground up to 400. This also includes a provision of non-lethal equipment, intelligence sharing, and support to combat cyber attacks. Our ongoing commitment to Operation Unifier guarantees the Canadian Armed Forces continued support of the security forces of Ukraine so that Ukraine can defend its sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. Minister Anand will travel to Latvia and Ukraine to visit with our forces in the coming days. I want to thank the Canadian Armed Forces members of Operation Unifier who continue to do exemplary work on the ground. Additionally, Canada is providing up to $50 million to deliver development and humanitarian aid. I want to thank Minister Sajjan for his work on this. Of course, this support is in addition to the loan of up to $120 million for Ukraine we announced last week. We continue to call on Russia to de-escalate and engage in meaningful dialogue until a peaceful diplomatic solution is reached. This is something I mentioned earlier today in my discussion with President von der Leyen of the European Union. Canada remains a steadfast friend to Ukraine and will continue working closely with the Ukrainian government and partners in the region. Thank you all. Je suis maintenant très heureux de céder la parole à la vice-première ministre Freeland.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre, et bon après-midi tout le monde. I'd like to start by saying that I am proud to be Ukrainian Canadian, and I'm proud of the contributions that our Ukrainian Canadian community has made to Canada for more than 130 years now. And the human connections that exist between Canada and Ukraine, thanks in large part to that community, are precious and important. But I want to be very clear today that Canada's policy towards Ukraine in the current crisis is not guided by those human connections or the special relationship they have created. Il est essentiel pour le Canada, en janvier 2022, de soutenir l'Ukraine. Nous y avons un intérêt national clair et urgent. Il s'agit d'une lutte entre la démocratie et l'autoritarisme. Il s'agit d'une confrontation directe à l'ordre international fondée sur la règle de droit. C'est une tentative de le remplacer par un monde dicté par la force, où les grandes puissances ont le pouvoir de redessiner les frontières et de dicter les politiques étrangères de démocratie souveraine. The stakes in this conflict are stark and directly relevant to Canada and the Canadian national interest. This is a struggle between democracy and authoritarianism. This is a direct challenge to the rules-based international order and an attempt to replace it with a world in which might makes right and where the great powers, the nuclear-armed powers, have the authority to redraw the borders, dictate the foreign policies, and even rewrite the constitutions of sovereign democracies whose only fault is that they are smaller and their militaries are not as powerful. Canadians, our own parents and grandparents, fought and died to establish the rules-based international order during and after the Second World War. They did that because they knew it was the right thing to do, of course, but also because they understood that Canada, as a middle power, had a clear and direct national interest in a world order based on rules. That rules-based international order is today facing its most serious challenge since it was first established. Ukraine is on the front lines of that struggle, and that is why Canada is standing with Ukraine. The world's dictators are watching to see if our alliance of democracies has the will and the capacity to stand up for the rules-based international order. We must, and we will, show them that we understand the gravity of this challenge and that we will rise to it. I now turn the floor over to my colleague, our Minister of National Defence, Anita Anand.
Bon après-midi tout le monde. Since 2015, approximately 200 members of the Canadian Armed Forces have been on the ground in Ukraine under Operation Unifier, training Ukrainian soldiers to the tune of over 30,000 soldiers, including 2,000 members of the Ukrainian National Guard. Today, we are pleased to announce the extension and expansion of Operation Unifier. With approximately $340 million, we will increase the capacity of our training mission in Ukraine, deploying up to 400 members of the Canadian Armed Forces, with up to 60 of those members being deployed in the coming days. Ça, c'est important. Ça, c'est historique. De plus, j'annonce aujourd'hui que le Centre de la sécurité de communication va améliorer sa collecte de renseignements, sa cybersécurité et ses cyberopérations. Ces mesures aideront l'Ukraine à renforcer sa sécurité et sa capacité à se défendre contre plusieurs menaces. These decisions are not ones that we or I take lightly. Indeed, as Minister of National Defence, nothing is more important to me than the safety and the security of our Canadian Armed Forces. We know that the security environment in Ukraine is evolving and is concerning. Ce qui concerne l'Ukraine, l'engagement du Canada envers la paix, la stabilité et la sécurité est constant. Our announcement today comes after a series of engagements with partners and allies, and with Ukraine, including with my counterpart, the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, Rezhnikov, with whom I spoke last week, yesterday, and indeed communicated with today. I look forward to meeting with him and visiting Ukraine and the Baltic states in the coming days. Je suis persuadée que ce soutien accru représente une contribution tangible pour l'Ukraine, ses militaires et son peuple en ces temps difficiles. Et je continuerai à travailler avec General Air, mes collègues et mes homologues pour faire en sorte que l'armée canadienne réponde aux besoins des forces ukrainiennes. Je voudrais remercier les forces armées canadiennes pour leur important travail. I would like to thank sincerely the Canadian Armed Forces for their ongoing work and commitment in this region. Maintenant, je vais passer la parole à ma collègue, la ministre Joly. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Anita. Bonjour tout le monde. Canada is resolute in our support for Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. I made sure to underscore this during my meetings last week with leaders in Kiev, in Paris, and also in Brussels. I had productive discussions with the leadership in Ukraine, of the EU, and of NATO. I also met with foreign ministers of France, Belgium, and I spoke recently to the U.S. Secretary Blinken and Germany's Minister Baerbock. We're united and speaking with one voice in support of Ukraine and its people. And we're working in lockstep. Let me be clear, we are absolutely committed to a diplomatic solution. Diplomacy is the only viable path forward for Russia. Any further aggression will have serious consequences, including coordinated sanctions, and Canada is prepared. Soyons clairs, nous sommes déterminés à poursuivre la voie diplomatique. La solution diplomatique est la seule option pour la Russie. Si la Russie poursuit ses agressions envers l'Ukraine, il y aura des conséquences sévères, incluant des sanctions coordonnées avec nos alliés. Et donc, le Canada est prêt. Russia's actions are threatening the rules at the core of countries' sovereignty and territorial integrity. It is challenging the international rule-based order and the world stability. In that sense, Ukraine's security is also Europe's security, but it is the world's security and therefore our security here at home in Canada. This is why our partners and allies agree that we must respond. Russia's threat has destabilized Ukraine's economy, which is why we have offered $120 million in loan to support economic resiliency. And this was an ask that President Zelensky made to me last week when I met with him, but also that he made to the Prime Minister during his conversation. And I was proud of our government's ability to respond quickly. An important part of our work, as my colleagues have discussed, is Operation Unifier. I was proud to meet with Operation Unifier troops on the ground last week, and Canadians and Ukrainians can be proud of the important work they're doing, and following today's announcement, will continue to do. And to complement the work of Operation Unifier, we will be increasing our diplomatic capacity, both at home here, but also in Kyiv, in Ukraine. This is critical for deterrence and de-escalation. We will have a new task force at Global Affairs to coordinate our efforts across our government, and we will have more resources to analyze and respond to the situation also on site in Ukraine. It is a very effective strategy to make sure that we are resisting any further Russian invasion, but also misinformation by the Russian government. Canada will continue to work towards a peaceful solution to this rapidly evolving crisis while preparing for Russian escalation. Afin de complémenter le travail de l'opération Unifier qui a été annoncée par le Premier ministre et aussi par ma collègue Anita Anand, nous allons augmenter la capacité de notre corps diplomatique, autant ici à Ottawa, au pays, mais également à Kiev, en Ukraine. Nous aurons plus de ressources pour analyser et répondre à la situation sur place. Et c'est une des meilleures stratégies pour faire en sorte de résister à l'agression russe et à la désinformation effectuée par le gouvernement russe lui-même. Le Canada va continuer de travailler pour trouver une solution pacifique au conflit, mais nous serons également prêts si la Russie tente d'escalader le conflit. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
On va commencer la période des questions pour 25 minutes. On commence avec les journalistes dans le foyer, puis aller au téléphone. Starting with reporters in the foyer, then we'll go to the phone. Radio-Canada, c'est à vous.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Les Américains ont envoyé des missiles, 280 tonnes de munitions. Vous craignez un conflit armé, mais vous n'envoyez pas d'armes mortelles. Qu'est-ce que vous craignez? Est-ce que vous avez peur de provoquer les Russes?
Ça fait bien des années qu'on est sur le terrain en Ukraine avec l'opération Unifier en train de former les militaires ukrainiens pour pouvoir défendre l'intégrité territoriale de l'Ukraine. Nous allons continuer, nous allons augmenter nos effectifs en personnel pour cette mission de formation à partir des jours à venir. On pourra aller jusqu'à doubler cette mission-là. En plus, on envoie de l'équipement non létal pour aider l'armée ukrainienne à poursuivre ses besoins. Nous sommes là pour démontrer la solidarité de l'Occident par rapport au peuple ukrainien et pour démontrer que nous cherchons effectivement une solution diplomatique, mais nous allons être là pour appuyer l'Ukraine dans le besoin. we're announcing that we are continuing the training mission that Canadian troops have been engaged in for a number of years now in Ukraine to ensure that Ukrainians can defend their territorial integrity, defend their democracy. This is something that Canada has been steadfast on, and today we're announcing that we are not only extending it for another 3 years, we're immediately increasing the number of Canadian soldiers who will be there to train in Ukraine up to 400, which will be doubling of the number of Canadian soldiers there to support the Ukrainian military in its development to be able to defend the Ukrainian people. We know that the solution to this tension must be diplomatic, not military, which is why we continue to demonstrate our steadfastness with the people of Ukraine while pushing for a peaceful solution.
J'aimerais vous entendre sur le convoi qui est en direction d'Ottawa de camionneurs. Il y a des gens en marge de cette organisation-là, de ce convoi-là, qui disent qu'ils veulent faire de cette journée de samedi, le 6 janvier, là, comme ce qu'on a vu au Capitole à Washington. Est-ce que vous craignez des dérapages cette fin de semaine?
La réalité, c'est que presque 90% des camionneurs au Canada sont vaccinés, comme presque 90% de notre population. Les Canadiens se préoccupent de leur liberté, de leurs droits, oui, et ils savent que la meilleure façon de protéger leurs droits et de leur liberté, c'est d'en finir avec cette pandémie. C'est pour ça qu'en tant que gouvernement, en tant que leader, je reste axé sur la défense des Canadiens qui ont fait tant de sacrifices au cours des dernières années pour protéger les travailleurs de première ligne, pour protéger nos travailleurs de la santé, pour protéger nos aînés et se faire vacciner et faire les bonnes choses. Les propos que tiennent certains des gens associés à ce convoi sont inacceptables et sont inacceptables pour la vaste majorité des Canadiens. It's important to underline that close to 90% of truckers in this country are vaccinated, like close to 90% of Canadians. Over the past many months and years now, Canadians have stepped up to protect each other, to protect our frontline workers, to protect our elders, to protect our young people, to protect people like truckers who are putting food on our grocery store shelves. Canadians have stepped up to do the right thing to protect the freedoms and the rights of Canadians to get back to the things we love to do. We know the way through this pandemic is by getting everyone vaccinated. And the overwhelming majority, close to 90% of Canadians, have done exactly that. The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country.
Next question.
John Perry, CBC. Can you describe what non-lethal equipment is going to include, and why limit it to that? Why not provide weapons to help the Ukrainians defend themselves?
We have, over the past many years, been there to support the Ukrainian military with extremely effective training missions. We've trained close to 30,000 Ukrainian troops with Canadian knowledge and know-how in a way that is making them much more effective and able to continue to defend their homeland. This is something that Canada can and will continue to do. Indeed, we're increasing our support for Operation Unifier, leaving room to double it in the coming months, because we know that that is something that Canadians can do very well to concretely help Ukraine, on top of the $120 million in sovereign loan that we offered as of last week, on top of all the other helps. In terms of non-lethal military supports, things like body armor, optics and scopes, elements like that, but I'll turn to the Defense Minister to speak further to what the non-lethal aid actually looks like.
The Prime Minister is exactly right on the mark. We are supplying, in terms of non-lethal aid, equipment and supplies in the area of items that will assist with surveillance and equipping our Canadian Armed Forces on the ground. But I just want to take a step back and reiterate the importance of the announcement that we're making today. Let's be clear. The biggest contribution that Canada can make to Ukraine right now is people. We have trained, our soldiers have trained over 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers. We should not underestimate the importance of this training mission. And indeed, when I am speaking with my allies across the NATO membership, it is consistently understood that Canada's mission in Ukraine has been one of significance, one of importance, and one of continued usefulness. And it is on that basis that we made the announcement here today to increase and expand the scope of Operation Unifier. I will continue to dialogue with my colleague, Minister Reznikov, in terms of Ukraine's ongoing needs, and of course, Canada will continue to monitor the evolving situation and respond accordingly. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up, Prime Minister, Minister Joly talked about possible sanctions, and I'm wondering what you're looking at. If you can give us any idea of what possible sanctions Russia could face.
I think one of the most important things is to be both clear and united as a Western world on the concerns we have and on the unacceptability of further Russian aggression against Ukraine. That's why in my conversation with President von der Leyen earlier today of the European Union, in all of our conversations with our counterparts in Western countries, we're agreed that strong, cohesive and aligned sanctions on individuals, on financial institutions, on other areas and sectors of the economy are going to be extremely important. And Russia needs to be under no illusions that the concerted approach by Western democracies will be clear and forceful in terms of economic impact on Russia. Okay. Nous savons que par rapport aux sanctions, le plus important, c'est de rester aligné et sans équivoque. C'est pour ça que dans mes conversations avec la présidente de l'Union européenne, avec nos conversations avec nos homologues dans les différents pays alliés occidentaux, nous sommes d'accord que des sanctions fermes et alignées contre la Russie sont très importants pour démontrer le coût très élevé qui serait attaché pour le peuple russe à toute incursion continue en Ukraine.
Prochaine question.
Mackenzie Grover, CTV. Has your government ruled out sending lethal aid to Ukraine?
We continue to look for ways to be helpful to the Ukrainian people as they stand up for their rights to live in a democracy, to choose the course of their country, to defend their territorial integrity. This is something that we are unequivocal on, and we have been for a long time. We have responded in a number of different ways, from the long-standing Operation Unifier that we're announcing today will have the capacity to double the amount of Canadian troops on the ground, training the Ukrainian military to further be able to defend itself, to financial supports, to non-lethal aid. And we will continue to monitor the situation closely and stand by our Ukrainian friends as we look to give them the support that they need.
A number of Conservative politicians, both federally and provincially, have been tweeting out pictures of grocery store shelves with a little short of groceries right now, and they've been blaming the vaccine mandate for truckers as the reason why there's potential shortages. Do you think there's any link between a vaccine mandate for truckers and potential shortages for food in Canada?
The fact that close to 90% of truckers in this country are vaccinated means that the Conservatives, unfortunately, are again engaged in a campaign of disinformation. I heard one of the Conservative MPs even tweeted out a picture of grocery shelves in the UK and tried to pass it off as Canadian. This is the kind of disinformation that, unfortunately, we've come to grow used to from the Conservative Party, even during a significant health and economic crisis like this one. Let's be very clear. The challenges and disruptions to the global supply chain right now are due to COVID-19. And the best way to prevent further disruptions to our supply chains is by making sure that people don't fall sick, by making sure that people are vaccinated. We've been unequivocal, and we were very clear in the last election, that vaccination is the way through this, whether it's for travelers, whether it's for federal public servants or areas of federal jurisdiction. We are moving forward with the support of the vast majority of Canadians who themselves have done the right thing and gotten vaccinated. Vaccines are how we get back to the things we love, and that's what Canadians are continuing to do.
Prochaine question.
Bonjour Monsieur Trudeau, Inès Lombardo de Franco-Presse. S'il y a bel et bien des tensions, une escalade de tensions samedi, qu'est-ce que votre gouvernement prévoit de faire? Est-ce que vous prévoyez de faire un compromis ou de reculer carrément?
La meilleure façon d'en finir avec la COVID-19, c'est de se faire vacciner. Nous avions annoncé au mois de novembre qu'à partir de ce mois-ci, tous les camionneurs qui traversent la frontière américaine, qui reviennent au Canada, devraient être vaccinés s'ils veulent éviter de devoir faire une quarantaine obligatoire. Ça fait des mois qu'on a prévu que ça allait se passer comme ça, et je peux souligner que presque 90% des camionneurs au Canada se sont fait vacciner. Ce n'est qu'une petite minorité de gens qui ne parlent pas, ni pour les camionneurs, ni pour les autres Canadiens, qui continuent à ralentir notre sortie de cette pandémie et à mettre à risque nos travailleurs du système de santé, nos travailleurs de première ligne qui travaillent d'arrache-pied pour aider les Canadiens dans cette situation extrêmement difficile.
Sur un autre sujet, vous sortez de la retraite du cabinet. Vous aviez fixé avant Noël 4 projets de loi prioritaires. Est-ce que vous avez des priorités là pour la reprise des travaux parlementaires?
On a les priorités que les Canadiens nous ont envoyées pour faire, c'est-à-dire d'en finir avec continuer la lutte contre la COVID-19, lutter contre les changements climatiques avec encore plus d'actions concrètes et surtout être axé sur la reprise économique et l'abordabilité de la coût de la vie pour les Canadiens, avec des mesures comme la baisse des prix en garderie à travers le pays, avec des mesures comme les mesures pour contrer les crises de logement, avec des mesures concrètes pour lutter contre les changements climatiques. On continue d'être ambitieux et pour les Canadiens et pour la relance économique du Canada.
Merci. On va maintenant tourner au téléphone. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. You may press star 1 if you have a question. Vous pouvez appuyer sur étoile 1 si vous avez une question. The first question is from Ryan Tumulty from the National Post. Please go ahead.
Sir, I want to try this again. You've been asked a few times today why you've declined to send lethal weapons to the Ukrainian army. I'm wondering if you can directly say why you're only providing non-lethal support.
Canada is making a significant announcement today that we will be continuing and expanding an extremely important and successful mission to train Ukrainian forces on the ground. For the past number of years, through Operation Unifier, Canadians have been there to support Ukraine in its defense of its territory and of its sovereignty by training the Ukrainian military. This is the way Canada can best help. And it's an extension of our firm belief that standing up for Ukraine means being there so they can speak and defend themselves, while at the same time continuing to pursue diplomatic solutions at all levels. We know that it is up to Russia to choose to not invade Ukraine. In order to do that, we are demonstrating that it will be very costly for Russia in terms of sanctions, in terms of condemnation and actions by the global community that will demonstrate that it is not in their interest to invade or overthrow the government of Ukraine.
Following up.
Yes, sir. Last month, General Eyre, the CDS, suggested that adding additional NATO troops could inflame the situation. Are you concerned about that? Have you talked with General Eyre about that issue?
I can assure you that the Canadian military is eager to continue to step up on the important and valuable work they've been doing for years on supporting the Ukrainian military to be able to further defend the integrity and the sovereignty of their democratic government. This is something that Canada has been doing well. And with our announcement today, not only are we going to be shortly sending off an additional 60 Canadian Forces personnel, but we've raised the ceiling on this mission from 200 people to 400 people, effectively doubling the impact that the Canadian Armed Forces will have on the ground. And I want to take a moment to thank not just the troops I visited a number of years ago when I was in Ukraine for Operation Unifier, but thank those troops who will be going to Ukraine to continue to support our Ukrainian friends in this time of difficulty.
Opérateur, prochaine question.
La prochaine question de Raymond Fillon, TVA. La parole est à vous.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Est-ce que des militaires canadiens pourraient participer à des combats advenant une invasion russe de l'Ukraine?
C'est une mission de formation et non une mission de combat. La protection des militaires canadiens est évidemment une priorité pour nous et il y a des plans de contingence si jamais la Russie décide, malgré tous les efforts diplomatiques et autres des pays alliés, d'envahir l'Ukraine. Nous allons s'assurer que les Canadiens soient en sécurité, mais entre-temps, la mission de formation d'aider les Ukrainiens à pouvoir se défendre mieux contre une agression russe continue d'être ce qu'on va faire. This is not a combat mission, this is a training mission. The Canadian military will be there to advise and assist. We will continue on training. It is not a combat mission. The protection and safety of Canadian soldiers is paramount in this mission, as it is in all missions. And in the event of a Russian incursion or invasion into Ukraine, we will ensure that Canadian military remains safe.
En suivi.
Mis à part l'opération Unifier, est-ce que vous excluez l'envoi de troupes canadiennes additionnelles dans la région de l'Ukraine ou dans l'Europe de l'Est? Il y a les Américains qui sont en train de planifier d'envoyer des milliers de troupes dans les pays de l'OTAN. Est-ce que le Canada pourrait participer à ça?
Le Canada est déjà présent dans l'Europe de l'Est, pas seulement en Ukraine, mais aussi en Lettonie, où on a la commande d'un groupe de combat pour l'OTAN, accompagné d'autres militaires d'autres pays. Mais le Canada est là pour démontrer notre solidarité en tant qu'OTAN pour défendre nos valeurs et nos démocraties. Pour l'instant, l'opération qu'on annonce aujourd'hui, ce doublage potentiel de l'opération Unifier, c'est une grande annonce pour les forces armées canadiennes et c'est une grande aide que le Canada offre à l'Ukraine dans des moments de difficulté.
Thank you. Operator, next question.
The next question is from Tonda McCharles from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Prime Minister, despite your characterization of the offer as a great help, it's not exactly what the Ukrainian ambassador has asked you for. They've asked you for weapons, and so I want to understand a little bit more. If the objective of Canada and NATO is deterrence to the Russians, then how does scopes and some body armor deter Vladimir Putin?
The solidarity that NATO members, that allied countries across Europe are demonstrating in our support for Ukraine, our support for the Ukrainian people in their ability to defend themselves, is a significant deterrence in itself. We have been clear on the steep economic sanctions and measures that will be brought in if Russia invades Ukraine to any further degree. We have been clear that we stand with the democratically elected Ukrainian government and the choice of the Ukrainian people to continue to live in a democracy. And the strongest articulation of that is the fact that for the past many years we have had Canadian troops on the ground training up over 30,000 soldiers in Ukraine to be able to defend their homeland. And indeed, we are announcing today that we are increasing and extending that mission to make sure that it's very clear that Ukraine has the capacity to defend itself and has the support of its allied countries. But in regards to the conversations with the Ukrainian ambassador and the engagements that I've had directly with President Zelensky and that we've had directly with the Ukrainian officials, including the president, I'll turn to Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mélanie Joly, who met with President Zelensky just last week. Mélanie.
Thank you. Merci. Thank you. Tonda, to your question, first and foremost, when I met President Zelensky last week, the most important ask from him, actually the single one, was for Canada to provide a sovereign loan, which we were able to offer within 3 days at an amount of $120 million. Afterwards, other countries and organizations have followed suit, and therefore we saw the European Union announcing a sovereign loan and also grants up to 1.2 billion euros a bit earlier this week. So that was for economic stability. The other thing also that my foreign minister counterpart from Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba, asked me was really making sure that we extend Operation Unifier. Canada has a very strong footprint with the National Guard and the Armed Forces of Ukraine, as mentioned by my colleague, Minister of Defense. We are present in 13 points all across Ukraine, and in that sense, of all our Western allies, we have one of the most important presence on site. And so I think that the announcement today shows the fact that Canada is really supporting Ukrainian people and making sure that we are part of a strong response in terms of showing that Ukrainians themselves can work with us to de-escalate and be ready should there be a further Russian aggression. Thank you.
Following up.
Thanks. I want to understand, so if I understand all the answers to now, you're not planning to reinforce or send more Canadian troops to Operation Reassurance in Latvia at this point, but I don't also understand at what is the threshold for increasing the Canadian military mission in Ukraine from now 260 up to the 400? I mean, if it's over 3 years, what is the trigger that sets the deployment up to 400?
Obviously, we are sending immediately 60 more Canadian troops to help with training, and we have increased the ceiling for training to 400. That will be for the duration of this extension to the mission for the coming 3 years. The decisions on increasing levels will very much depend on the situation on the ground, on the need, on the capacity of the Ukrainian military to avail themselves of the training that Canadians have been offering. But because that's a slightly more operational question, I'll turn back to the Minister of Defence to talk about how we're going to move up towards that ceiling of 400. Anita.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Of course, we are continuing to ensure that we have the troops on the ground here at home to assist with the missions at home. You've seen the Canadian Armed Forces across the country over the past year and a half assisting with forest fires and floods, with vaccines, and also internationally with the evacuation of Afghanistan. So the commitment that we're making today for up to 400 Canadian Armed Forces to be deployed to Ukraine under Operation Unifier is very significant, and of course the decisions to send additional troops will be made as those troops are available to go, given the other demands on the time of the Canadian Armed Forces here at home and abroad. But make no mistake, this is a very significant extension and expansion of Operation Unifier. And Tonda, you mentioned Operation Reassurance, and I just want to provide you with the numbers under Operation Reassurance so you can have a sense of the extent to which the Canadian Armed Forces are present in this region. We have approximately 900 members of the Canadian Armed Forces under Operation Reassurance, as well as five planes. We, as Mélanie Joly just said, have an extremely large footprint relative to our counterparts. Indeed, we have other countries at the current time suggesting that they join Operation Unifier because of the leading role that we play in the region. And so I want to assure you that this announcement today is increasing the impact that we will have in the region with the training mission per se. And the type of training that we will continue to do, of course, include unit and brigade level tactical training, combat engineer training, such as improvised explosive device disposal and explosive ordnance disposal, sniping reconnaissance, military policing, development of non-commissioned officer corps, and medical training. So that is an expansive list of activities that we are undertaking at the current time in Ukraine under Unifier and in the Baltics under Reassurance. And we will be able to increase that capacity with the announcement that we are making here today to a significant degree. Thank you.
Merci. Opérateur, on va prendre une dernière question au téléphone.
La prochaine question de Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. La parole est à vous.
Merci. Bonjour. Ma première question est pour M. Trudeau. D'abord, juste pour être certaine de bien comprendre, on n'écarte pas l'envoi de matériel militaire dans le futur. Et puis, je me doute un peu de la réponse, là, mais est-ce que vous avez informé Moscou de toutes les mesures que vous annoncez aujourd'hui? Est-ce qu'il y a un canal de communication avec le Kremlin?
On a toujours été très clair avec le gouvernement russe sur notre perspective par rapport à leur annexation illégale de Crimée, leur interférence dans l'est de l'Ukraine et leur positionnement agressif de troupes sur les frontières de l'Ukraine. C'est inacceptable. Le Canada reste solidaire avec le peuple ukrainien et nous allons continuer d'être là pour permettre aux Ukrainiens de défendre leur liberté, leur démocratie et l'intégrité de leur territoire.
En suivi?
Je continuerai avec une question pour Mme Freeland cette fois-ci. Vous avez insisté sur le fait que tout ce qu'on annonce aujourd'hui, c'est dans l'intérêt national du Canada. J'aimerais que vous expliquiez un peu plus aux Canadiens en quoi c'est dans notre intérêt national Et également, que répondrez-vous à ceux qui disent que vous avez un certain parti pris parce que vous êtes d'origine ukrainienne?
Merci pour la question. Et j'ai dit ce que j'ai dit parce que je pense que c'est très important pour tous les Canadiens et Canadiennes de comprendre que oui, le Canada, c'est un pays qui comprend la valeur de la diversité. C'est un pays qui comprend la valeur du multiculturalisme et toutes nos communautés d'origine d'autre part font une partie importante de la société canadienne, de le discours politique canadien. Et moi, je trouve que c'est une chose très importante et qui ajoute, pas seulement ajoute, c'est une fondation du Canada. Mais c'est très important de distinguer entre l'importance, la fierté que j'ai en tant que Canadienne d'origine ukrainienne et des principes qui guident notre politique à l'étranger. Et c'est pour cette raison que c'est très important de souligner. Maintenant, on parle d'un conflit entre la démocratie et l'autoritarisme. On parle de l'importance de l'ordre international fondé sur les règles. On parle du droit d'un pays souverain de contrôler ses frontières et de contrôler sa politique étrangère. Et je pense que pour nous, les Canadiens, les citoyens d'un pays, oui, nous sommes fiers du Canada. Nous sommes la 10e économie du monde. Mais nous ne sommes pas une des grandes puissances du monde. Alors pour nous, nous avons un intérêt national direct et clair en ce qui concerne cet enjeu. Et vous avez parlé de question des origines ethniques des politiciens, des leaders canadiens. Et est-ce que nous, les Canadiens qui ont une origine qui n'est pas seulement peut-être de l'Angleterre ou de la France, peut-être autochtone dans nos racines, est-ce que nous avons un droit d'avoir une voix dans la politique étrangère du Canada? Et je dois dire, ni ma mère ni mon père n'étaient pas nés au Canada. Mon père était né en Angleterre. Il était né à Dorchester pendant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale parce que mon grand-père était un des Canadiens qui a lutté dans la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Il fait partie du RAF parce qu'il a joint la guerre au début de la guerre. Et je dois dire, personne n'a pas me demandé si ces racines que j'ai en Angleterre, ma grand-mère est écossaise, personne ne m'a demandé si ces racines influencent les positions que je prends. Et je dois dire que pour le Canada, comme un pays multiculturel, un pays qui est fier de notre diversité, nous devons vraiment être clairs que tous les citoyens canadiens ont le droit d'avoir une voix et de prendre les positions claires en ce qui concerne l'intérêt national du Canada et que nous prenons ces positions en tant que fiers citoyens du Canada. Et c'est ce que je suis. Merci.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. We'll take one last question before ending the press conference.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. Prime Minister, is Canada willing to station some of those Unifier troops further east in Ukraine?
Operation Unifier is and has been a training mission over the past number of years. It has concentrated its efforts in Western Ukraine, where the base that they do much of the training is at, and I was pleased to visit that base a number of years ago when I visited. But there were positionings throughout the Ukrainian territory of Canadian troops. They have now been focused all in Western Ukraine, where the risks are lowest and where they can concentrate most directly on training Ukrainian troops to be able to continue to defend the integrity of their territory. I think one of the things that is really important for everyone to understand is Russia's threat to invade Ukraine isn't just something that should concern Ukrainian Canadians or Europeans. It's something that should concern us all. The threat to invade a sovereign democracy of people who've chosen a path and elected a government to make progress and standing up for rights and freedoms and economic opportunity, to see an autocratic country like Russia choose to use its military might and its heft to bully and threaten an independent democracy, to bow to its will, to be constrained in its path forward, is a threat not just to Ukrainians, but is a threat to all of us who believe in the rights of citizens to elect their governments and pick the direction for their country. We are seeing around the world right now a backsliding of democracy, an attack on democratic principles through many different forms. But the direct threat of a Russian invasion to take control of Ukraine, to take away the choice of the Ukrainian people to choose their future, is something that concerns not just Ukraine, not just Eastern Europe, but all of us who cherish democracy.
Merci de vous être rejoint à nous. C'est ce qui m'a fait à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Merci tout le monde.
Also affected. Countries know the geographic areas where the needs are greater because of poverty, because of high levels of violence, or because those areas concentrate families in vulnerable situations, such as migrant families or indigenous families. Children from these areas are more affected by the pandemic. So equity must be at the center of the pandemic response. This means providing more support and resources where the needs are higher. In the 2 years we've suffered from this pandemic, we have learned that for children, a pandemic response also includes ensuring that they receive the health interventions that they need to promote health and to prevent other diseases, in addition, to COVID-19. Routine immunization, growth monitoring, promotion of breastfeeding, prevention of HIV, mother-to-child transmission, and mental health support are among the other important services that must continue. Children also need safe spaces where they can play, where they can interact with other children and adults in their family and community. All of that is involved in a comprehensive response to the pandemic. Children need those to stay healthy, to learn, and to thrive. So thank you again for joining us today. Let us continue, each of us, to play our part so that we can indeed bring this pandemic to a close and begin once again to concentrate on our development towards a better and greater future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tien, for this final question, this final answer. A los colegas periodistas, llegamos al final de la sesión.
Colleagues, this is the end of the session. Unfortunately, we were not able to answer all the questions, but we will follow up on email. You can send your questions to mediateam@bajo.org. And of course, you can find more information in our website about vaccine deliveries. We have links in our webpage. And thank you for being here today and being with us. And we wish you a very good week and we'll see you next week again. Thank you.
Heads, you get a coffee. Tails, you get a coffee. You get a coffee.